And we have 16 panelists and 2 attendees. So I will call the meeting to order, our June 22nd school board meeting at 6:19 we're starting. And we begin with our truth and budget hearing, which we've worked into our regular agenda a bit, but we are disclosing that we are mandated to have a budget passed by June 30th in 2020. So first up for that hearing piece is Chris LaHaye.
Right, thank you very much. It seems strange going before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, but I'll try to.
Well, so we might want to visit that. We've got you down further in for the discussion. We have this hearing piece. We don't have it scheduled to close out of the hearing piece. So go brief.
I'll do as briefly as I can. I wanted to give a little bit of background information about what the Truth and Taxation hearing is, but I'll be as brief as I can. I will not go into the budget as I did last time. So okay. I did throw together a little presentation regarding this, just to explain what it is. So I mentioned this last board meeting as well. Can everybody see my screen? Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yep.
So this is the requirement that we have to put this language on our resolutions, and I won't read through it again, but basically this just states that the school district is going to levy 17.9172 mils of ad valorem taxes on non-homestead and non-qualified agricultural property, and we will use that for operating purposes. So we have to have that language in our resolutions. Real briefly for the budget hearing, I just want to explain what it is. So each year I have to calculate what's known as the base tax rate fraction. And you can see the formula on this screen that gives us that calculation. So our 19 taxable value minus any losses divided by our projected 2020 taxable value minus any 2020 additions. And what that gives us when we put our numbers into that is a base tax rate fraction, which this year is 0.9813. Okay, and essentially what that says is if we don't have this hearing at all, we can't levy any more property taxes for the use of operating than we did last year. And we're not going to levy more from a standpoint of, the 17.9173 mils or 712 mils, but because taxable values are increasing, the school district is receiving more funding. Okay, so without this budget hearing, we would need to reduce our non-homestead operating millage rate by this fraction, by this 0.9813, and we would be levying 17.5821 mils rather than the 17.9172. So that the district isn't going to receive any more taxes than the prior year, even though people's tax rates aren't going to go up anyways. So what this hearing allows us to do is simply to take that same fraction and multiply it by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which for this year is 1.9%. And so when we put that in there, by virtue of having this Truth and Taxation hearing, we're saying, hey, we still get to have this base tax rate fraction, but now we get to multiply it by inflation, essentially. And it just so happened this year that came out to be exactly 1.0. So as you remember from the previous budget meetings that we had on June 8th, what we're going to do for this year is keep our non-homestead millage rate exactly the same as it was last year. The district's going to receive more property tax revenue because property tax values are going up, but we're not increasing our levy, our tax rate. I'm not sure if that makes a whole lot of sense. Feel free to ask me if you have any questions. I can go into deeper detail on that. But those are, with the numbers in it, how we came to this value. So this is a requirement by the state statute that we have to hold this hearing. So we will levy 17.9172 mils rather than, if we didn't hold the hearing, 17.5821 mils. And if you read the language, even though our millage rate is not changing, this does represent the difference, 0.3351 of an increase due to property tax values increasing. Okay, and percentage-wise, that's 1.91%, which is exactly what the CPI increase is for the year. And if we weren't having this budget hearing, $46,949 that we would use for operating, teachers, salaries, supplies, materials, just general operating would be lost. But we are able to just by having this budget hearing. That is my explanation. I tried to be brief with it. So I'm not going into any detail about what we're using it for, but that's a requirement of the Truth in Taxation hearing, is just to explain where that comes from. So any questions? All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for the other piece of that, when Chris goes through the other budget down in the agenda, any public comments regarding that hearing, we had that scheduled during the public comments before we would approve that budget. So we are allowing public comment for that. Okay, so we'll move on to the call to order, and we'll let the minutes read too, please, Robin, that the same people that were, when we get to the roll call, will be the same. So call to order. Oh, we did that. Sorry. Pledge of Allegiance. We're out of order. So let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Now we've got roll call, and if we can let it, the minutes show that after the roll call, the same people were in attendance for the board for the Truth and Budget hearing. Tracy, if you could roll call, please.
Yes, Trustee Bowser,
Here.
Trustee Rivard,
Here.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Here,
Treasurer Gilmore,
Here.
Vice President Schaffner,
Here.
President Reed,
Here.
and Secretary Slager here.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a quorum, and we have everyone in attendance. And next we have our adoption of the agenda, and I'll entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
support,
Any discussion? Having none, I'll call the vote. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes,
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
yes,
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, the agenda is adopted. And next up, we have gratitudes. Does anyone have a gratitude they'd like to share?
I have one I would like to share on behalf of Brent Willett, FFA teacher. So Brent reached out to Jen Haberling and wanted to thank the Board of Education for the work that you did to approve the supplemental curriculum items for the FFA program last fall. So because of the investment into those supplemental materials, 6 of our students were able to achieve industry certified standards from different organizations. So Dylan Knopf achieved a BASF Plant Science Industry Certification. Jill Detweiler and Tanya Teppin received the Elko Veterinary Medical Applications Industry Certification. Morgan Chafin and Carly Dunham both received the Equine Management and Evaluation Industry Certification, and recipient of the Southwest Airlines Professional Communications Industry Certification was Kaylee Andrus. And Brett just wanted to reach out through Jen and thank the board for your thinking ahead and providing our students with those unique opportunities to gain those additional experiences and also those certifications as they move forward.
Okay, thank you. I did receive a community noticing when they drove through the campus, how things were mowed and kept up. They had moved away and they were going through town and driving. So they reached out for that they noticed that, so I'm sharing that as a gratitude. That was a nice reach out to receive. So I'm thankful for that. Okay. All right, we'll move on to 2020 retirements.
So this evening, we just want to bring attention to the retirement of 6 of our staff members. These individuals represent 148 years of service to Cedar Springs Public Schools. So first, Sherry Andrus is retiring. Sherry served as a middle school media specialist. She served with the district for 26 years and worked in various roles at Cedar Trails Beach, and then served a temporary status in our technology department, and then finished out her tenure with the district at the middle school. Shelley Bauer is retiring after 21 years of serving as a parent educator through the Parents as Teachers program. Amy Dode is retiring after 29 years of service with Cedar Springs Public Schools. She started actually teaching here at the Hilltop Building as a 5th grade teacher, transitioned to teaching 3rd grade in 1996, and then transitioned to 2nd grade at Beach Elementary School in 2010. Bonnie Heider is retiring after 23 years of service to the district. She started in 1997 as a New Beginnings alternate ed administrative assistant, and then finished out her career at Red Hawk as an administrative assistant there. Rob Neyer is retiring after 34 years of service to the district. Rob taught both middle school and high school math. Rob served as the varsity girls track coach, senior class advisor, freshman football coach, JV head football coach, varsity football coach, varsity wrestling assistant coach, and a girls track coach as well. And then lastly, Lori Overbeek is retiring. She served at Cedar View Elementary School, but she also served and initially was hired at Beach Elementary School as a recess program assistant, and Lori served the district for 15 years. So again, we're happy for these individuals as they transition on to life after serving in the public sector, serving students the way they have. But that gap of 148 years of experience will be missed as we transition and move forward. So we just wanted to recognize these individuals with the Board of Education. They did not have the opportunity to be celebrated at the end of the year as we normally would, but we thought it was fitting to share a little bit about their background with you this evening, and just allow them to, again, be reminded of how much we appreciate them and appreciate the work and the contributions that they've made over their careers.
I have a question. So if we wanted to send a thank you card, do we just give them to you, or will you give us their addresses?
So you can get them to us and we can send those out. You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It was not the ending that we'd like for their careers, but we're still grateful for their service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll move on to our consent agenda. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. The consent agenda is approved, and that brings us down to discussion. And our first item is 2019-2020 budget resolution with Chris LaHaye.
All right, thank you very much. So the budget resolutions are attached in board book. I won't put them on the screen, but we have a total of 12 resolutions for tonight to be approved. The 6 different funds for the current year final budget, and then the 6 funds again for the 2020-2021 initial budgets. As promised, I just wanted to go through briefly what has changed since our June 8th board meeting. I only made changes to the final budget for the current year, 2019-2020, for the general fund and the food service fund. So all other budgets have remained unchanged since our June 8th board meeting. So on your screen here, I have just one slide just to go over the general fund 2019-2020 budget. You can see out along the top there, I still have a proration of $550 per pupil budgeted. Again, that's predicated on our knowledge that there's just not enough tax revenue in the school aid fund to make it through the rest of this year. We're not sure where that revenue will come from if we're not going to receive a proration. So decided to keep it in the budget, better safe than sorry. You know, it's still very possible that the federal government will come through with some form of a bailout or some other funding will be used, but nothing has been announced yet, so we are keeping it in there. So other changes since the June 8th meeting, we did receive our Dean transportation invoices, which we had not received anything from Dean dating back to February when I first did the budget. So that equated to about an $82,000 expense reduction. I had budgeted based on our contract and had overshot that budget. So made that addition or that adjustment in this budget. And then a few other expense reductions. Legal services just brought those down, not seeing anything coming through in the next couple weeks that will impact this year. So brought that budget line down. Some other teaching material adjustments, a $20,000 expense reduction for regional special ed programs, mostly from the Kent ISD center programs that our budget was a little high on. And then I went through and made any last second adjustments to wages and benefits, as we had a whole nother payroll go through between the time that I finalized my budget picture for June 8th and the one that you have there. The one increase was mostly to My School Kent, which is a program that we can send our high school students to. The budget was based on an estimate from semester 1, and it turned out that a lot of our students had signed up for courses in semester 2, so it really had an impact there in that budget line. So an increase there. Overall, if you do recall from June 8th, the general fund picture was we were going to dip into fund balance by about $46,000 this year. The way I have it now is that we will actually add $54,000 to fund balance. So with some minor adjustments and just getting a little bit clearer picture, about $100,000 swing with the proration, that's where we will finish this year. Any questions about the general fund budget before we move on?
I like the swing. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a good swing. And, you know, again, Matt, it's the thing we just don't know about is the proration amount.
Sure.
What it'll be, if we'll see one. There's a pretty clear consensus that we're going to have to give, you know, there's going to be a reduction somewhere. We don't know whether it's going to be this year and next year or just really a big reduction next year, but just to kind of play to the best of my knowledge and my colleagues, that's where we decided to run with it for this one. So I am confident.
Chris, if we approve,
Sorry.
if we approve this final budget tonight, and then there are additional expenses that occur between now and the end of June,
Mm-hmm.
those will be reflected as budget variances. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So, and you're going to see that every year. You know, there's expenses that come down that are unforeseen. You know, you never want there to be a whole lot of things that are unforeseen at this point. But invoices turn up that, especially with people being out of the buildings for the most part over the last 3 months, I can see that happening where, you know, something slipped through the cracks. So typically, it's pretty widely regarded that if you can have a 1% variance in your budget, that's pretty good. I looked back at last year, and that's about where we were. It seems like a lot of money to us, but on a $38 million budget, if you come in within 350 to 400,000, that's generally regarded as pretty good. I think Jeff's variance last year was just north of 400,000. So yeah, it's you know, we go through and try to zero down those lines the best we can. But you leave a little bit of room in there because you don't want your variance to be negative, but you try to just be as responsible with it as possible. So very, very unlikely. I'll give myself a pat on the back if we hit it right at $54,000 addition to fund balance, but odds are there will be a little bit of variance in there.
And there's no chance of revenue changes, you don't believe?
Well, so that's the thing, this $550 per pupil, that's a proration. So again, we came into this school year under the presumption that we were going to receive $8,111 per student. And so we've operated like that all year. Obviously, COVID-19 hit. And so this is my best estimate that we're not going to actually receive $8,111 this year. They're going to come out within the next month and say, we don't have the revenues, and we're going to make that $7,651 per student. And we're going to see a smaller amount in our July and or August state aid payments, because we still get those and have to accrue them back to this fiscal year. So if that amount is zero and they don't prorate at all, then my revenue is going to be way off. We're going to add a lot more revenue than what I'm saying here. If that amount's 650, then we're going to eat into fund balance more than what I'm saying here. So it's just more unknowns than ever. And honestly, about half of the districts in the ISD are moving forward with a proration. Some are more, some are less than this one. Some are right there. And then others are saying, we think we're going to receive all of our revenue, and they're basing that on the hopes of a federal, bailout. So playing it a little bit conservative, but yeah, I mean, based on just not knowing, usually at this point in time, I know exactly where our revenues are going to be. And this year, it's just due to COVID-19, really a best estimate. But
You probably already told us this, but when does the state budget have to be finished so that we know a final number?
State budget has to be finished September 30th.
Wow.
So they have a lot of time. We received our state aid payments for this school year, like I said, through August. So we'll receive a state aid payment well, we just received one actually today. And then we'll receive our July state aid payment on July 20th, and we will book that back to this fiscal year. And then the same thing on August 20th. So that's revenue that's occurring in our 2020-2021 fiscal year that we are booking back or accruing back to this fiscal year. And that's just the auditing standards and how they work. We don't receive a state aid payment in September. No school districts do at all. So really they have until August to not pay us in full. And they have to, there's a whole process that goes into that. I haven't seen it happen, but the budget director has to notify the legislature, give them a 30-day notice that they're going to prorate the foundation allowance in order for them to try to find funds elsewhere or do something. And that 30-day clock has not started yet. They have not provided that notice. So technically at this point, we are to assume we're going to receive our full July state aid payment, and really the August state aid payment is the one that's in jeopardy. But we're just living in unprecedented times, so I really think anything's possible at this point. So and I hate to say it, but like most districts or all districts, we're just in a boat of uncertainty this year, and we're just doing the best we can to paint the clearest picture we can. But yeah, it's an interesting year for budgets. I'll say that.
I think you said it well.
Thank you for your work, Chris.
Yeah, and I appreciate your questions.
I appreciate you erring on the conservative side. I think that's very wise in how we move forward, because we just don't know. And I'd much rather have enough than not enough.
Well, that's just it. Yep, I appreciate that. And it's one of those things where, if I'm looking at the cold hard facts, and if somebody says they're going to give me $100, but I know for sure they only have a 20 in their wallet, I can't really depend on that $100. I'm gonna think, well, I'm gonna get that 20 maybe. So that's kind of the boat that we're in here. But maybe they'll get a loan from somebody. I don't know. The other one is, sorry, the food service budget. Let me see if I can get this to swing over here. Just had a few changes to the food service budget. Again, we are going to be dipping into fund balance for the food service fund in this year, but some of that was by design. If you guys recall, we've had an excess fund balance in the food service fund. The state does not like that. They do not allow it. So we had to submit a spend down plan for the fiscal year 1920, and we took care of everything on that list. So I'm confident we are going to be all set with our excess fund balance, quite frankly, because we didn't sell meals between March 13th to the end of the year. Holly Haywood did amazing work in feeding our community with drive-up meals and deliveries, and that really backfilled what we get with federal funds from free and reduced lunches. But the paid part of the lunches, we just didn't, that was a loss in revenue. So the only changes since the June 8th meeting was in getting those deemed transportation invoices. They did bill us, which we needed them to, for all of our food deliveries. So as you know, we actually used our buses, went around the community and delivered meals to people that needed them, to students that needed them. So that was about a $28,000 increase that I did not have on the original budget, but we did have about a $13,000 swing the other way, just in wages and benefits, not coming through exactly where they were booked previously. So you can see our expenditures will exceed our revenues for this year in food service again, but we're still going to have a fund balance around $320,000, which is north of 22%. Still a very, very, very favorable fund balance in the food service fund, and really where it needs to be to not have that excess fund balance and be put on another plan by the state. So that was it as far as changes from the June 8th board meeting to the current meeting, and where I have these budget resolutions coming in at. And I won't click through all of them, but that's what we are asking for you to adopt this evening. And I can answer any other questions anybody would like to see. If you would like me to put them up on the screen, I would be more than happy to.
For this particular one, are we continuing this program through the summer, and do we have that accounted for as an additional expense?
Yep. So the state is allowing us to continue with the COVID-19 shutdown style of food service up through June 30th. So we are not transporting meals anymore. We're not delivering them, but we are still feeding. We have 2 pickup times. Families can come. Anybody under the age of 18 can come to the high school and pick up 2 days of meals on Mondays and 3 days of meals on Wednesdays. That's a breakfast and lunch for each day. So we're continuing to feed. At last count, Holly emailed me about it last week. I think we were feeding between 315 and 360 children each day. So still a great need out there for it. Yes, and so that's still in the budget through June 30th for this fiscal year, and then we'll go back to somewhat of our normal summer feeding for July and August. The big difference is, and I think President Reed asked me about this in a previous meeting, in the past with the summer food program, you had to have congregate eating or feeding, so they had to be on site. They couldn't take the meals off site. They had to eat it there. That is not the case. They have waived that, so they're calling it traditional summer. They call it Meet Up and Eat Up as MDE's program for summer food service, but they can come and still pick up 2 days of meals on Mondays and 3 days of meals on Fridays, or I'm sorry, on Wednesdays. So by and large, it's continuing the same way. We're just going to account for it differently. It has a different code, but other than that, it will be largely the same. And we do have it staffed, so. Yep. But I had already accounted for that for the 2021 budget, so there's no changes there from my June 8th meeting. Any other questions about any of the budget resolutions? I'll pull that share off.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to move on to the 2021 budget resolutions. Finishing up last year, going into this year, next year.
And once again, I'd be very happy to answer any questions there or show them on the screen, but those have remained unchanged. Still budgeting the same $550 less per student for next year. So the budget is based on $7,561 per student being our foundation allowance for the 21 school year.
And the ones that are before us, just for clarification, it's a split between taking out of the fund balance and some changes to the,
For the 2020-21
Yep.
school year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for the general fund budget, the budget that will be adopted will have expenditures in excess of revenues by $1.2 million. So, and that's mostly based on having less foundation allowance. If that's where we come in at, that will still leave us with a fund balance of $6,121,685 ending next fiscal year, which is a percentage of our expenditures of 15.76%. So.
Okay.
And we'll see, because that is based on a student count we're probably more unsure of than ever before, and programming that we will learn a lot about in the next few months. So.
okay.
Chris, when will we see the first adjustment to that budget? What month do we see that in?
So in the past, I don't know about past years prior to this one. I know Jeff did his first amendment for you guys, for the board, in February. Every district does it differently. I typically like to take my first amendment to the board either in November or December. This year, I'm going to start working on the amendment as soon as we have a clear picture. A clear picture on where our revenue is going to be, a clear picture on whether we're fully remote or completely in person. So, you know, that's one of those things where board policy says we need to come back together for a budget amendment as soon as there are material changes in the budget and they are known. So as quickly as we have a good idea. If I had to give you a month, I'm going to strive for September or October, but that would require the state having a clear idea for us of where revenues are going to be by then. So it'll be something that we'll discuss more frequently. Just, you know, I'll give you guys the best updates I can, and we all will. But as far as an official amendment goes, I'm aiming for September to November, somewhere in there, as soon as we can get it all in a line.
And when do we get a first student count?
I don't know if Scott, you look like you wanted to say something on that. I usually look at student count right away, as soon as we can, you know, on the first day of school or even before that when we have our firm enrollments. But our official count day is in October. So
Yeah, there's been some conversation going around about utilizing the count from the 2019-2020 school year and apply it towards the 2020-2021 school year in response to the potential of districts losing students to online service providers. But I don't know where that is yet, but that is one of the things that we're asking our legislators to give us some grace on.
Yeah. Yep, I've heard that too. I don't think it's really gone through anywhere, but it's definitely being spoken about.
Yeah, you know, if your count is higher in 2020, 2021, then you'd get the higher number. But if it's lower in 2020, 2021, then you would get the whatever number was higher, last year's count or this year's count.
Far from a done deal, but just something that is being discussed for sure. Yep.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
last call for questions on the budget resolution for next year. It is on for action tonight. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the 2020 L4029 tax forms.
Yep, so I didn't bring anything back from the L4029s. Again, that was something I did I think it was an 8-slide budget presentation briefly. That's just the form we need to submit to all of our county treasurers and to the Kent County treasurer, just verifying that we are going to levy that 17.9172 mils and our debt levy of 7 mils and sinking fund as well. So that's just a form that we need to submit before June 30th and sign off on. So that's just an action item for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it as well.
Any questions?
I could be wrong, but it seems to me there were 3 counties involved last year. Is that untrue? Do we have a 3rd county that we levied a tax in?
Nope, just Kent County and Newaygo County, and we just have a real small piece in Ensley Township of Newaygo County. So, and I know I wasn't here, but I did look back just to be sure, and just Kent and Newaygo.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to item D, the annual school bond loan application with Chris.
Right, so the school bond loan application, I am going to share my screen once again for this. And if you do look in the board packet, there is quite a bit of information that goes along with this. I am not going to scroll through all of it. It really boils down to this, this form that I have to fill out. And this is just basically telling the state of Michigan, who operates the school bond loan fund program, how much we anticipate needing to borrow this year. So I've had, well, I'll run through this real quick, and then I just want to speak about a few other questions that I've had about the school bond loan fund. So without going into too much about debt, you know, we typically, you know, in all districts do, or most districts do, levy a debt fund, but depending on when the call dates are for those bonds, you may not have enough in any given year from your property tax levy to cover that debt. So if you look at where we're at for next year, we have our November 1st bond payments are due. 555,000 are due on November 1st. And then we have our principal and interest payments due on May 1st of 2021 of $5,555,000 for a total of $6,113,510 that are due during next fiscal year to be paid. So when we take our reconciled statements with the debt funds we have now, account for some delinquency, and then place in the debt funds that we will receive or are projected to receive during next fiscal year, it leaves us about $1.5 million short of having enough money in our debt funds from our 7 mil debt levy to pay what is due in the next year. So the state has set up what's known as the school bond loan fund for just this reason. We borrow that 1.5 million at a pretty low interest rate, make those debt payments, and then we pay them back as we move through. A few board members have asked me, we have a fund balance in our general fund. Why can't we just use our general fund dollars to pay for our debt rather than, you know, borrow from the school bond loan fund and pay the interest? And it's a great question. And I've spoken to actually our bond attorney at Troon about it. And although it's potentially allowable, there's several issues with it. And one of them is if we take $1.5 million out of our operating fund and put it in to pay off debt, we can't ever get that money back. We've used it to pay off debt for our capital projects that have already taken place, but it's not like we can borrow from the school bond loan fund moving the other way and use it for operating. They're completely separate. And if you remember at the beginning of this meeting, that at the Truth in Taxation hearing, when we say that we're levying that 17.9 mils, we're using it for operating purposes. So there's a little bit of an issue in regards to that, where we would be using our tax levy in the school aid fund that is levied for operating to put towards a different fund. And so there may be an issue there with commingling funds. And especially in the time of COVID-19 and the uncertainties that we're facing, it just doesn't feel like a wise thing to do at this point, to essentially use our operating funds, which are used for, teachers, everything that students need in the classroom, to pay off our capital debt. So we can definitely have that discussion further. And honestly, I haven't gotten a clear answer of whether it's even allowable yet. I've not done it in my experience, and I don't know anybody that has. But once you send those operating funds out the door for the use of debt, the debt fund can't loan them back to the general fund, if things were to slide the other way. So, any questions about this? This is not an action item tonight. The school bond loan application. This is just something that we need to approve before August 1st and send the notification to the state. And honestly, we would not borrow from the school bond loan fund until late April of 2021 anyways. And the reason for that is, as you can see, we only need $555,000 to pay our November 1st debt payments. And we will receive, we should receive most of our $4,600,000 property tax levy that we're a summer tax levy. So we'll receive most of that well before even the November 1 payments due, let alone the May 21 payment. So any questions about the form? School on bond loan fund, I don't know why I can't say it. But anything that you guys have there for me.
Thank you for the clarification of keeping things in certain lanes.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing just because, we have to keep all these funds separate in our ledger. We have to have separate bank accounts for them. So our sinking fund dollars, our debt fund dollars, our general fund dollars, food service dollars, they all have to be kept separately so they can't be intermingled. So it would be, I know our auditors wouldn't like it very much if we commingled them in any way.
Great. Okay. All right. We'll move on to item E, the district phone system upgrades. We have Chris Start and Rob Egler with us. Welcome. And we're ready to hear from you.
All right, gentlemen, give me 1 second. I have your presentation. I'm going to share it in a minute.
While you're doing that, thank you all. I'd like to take a minute. My name is Rob Egler. I'd like to take a minute to introduce Chris Dart. Together we are going to be talking to you a little bit about our district phone system and a proposal to upgrade the district phone system. We appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your time tonight.
Yep, and I should also add that most of you probably recognize Rob. Both Rob and Chris are technically employed by Kent ISD, but we contract with the ISD for technology services, and share Chris and Rob with another 3 districts in Region 1. I don't know how much of that has been discussed before, but they're both great at what they do, and we appreciate them very much. So without further ado, and I've had the pleasure in working with both of them in prior districts as well. Can everybody see that nice presentation?
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Great. All right, so a little overview of what we want to present to you. We're going to talk a little bit about our current phone system and a proposal to upgrade that phone system, some of the new features and benefits that we'll see with the new phone system, a timeline if approved, and then some cost information regarding that phone system. So our current phone system was installed in 2004. A little note I put in there: life expectancy of enterprise phone systems is 7 to 10 years. So you can see we're a little past that. In education, I think we get the most out of every piece of technology. So we're probably allowed 2 or 3 more years past that. Our server hardware, the back end, voice mail storage, everything that processes the phone calls is past end of life, and we actually can't even upgrade that at this point. We have handset limitations, handsets being the phones that sit on the desks. We have one model of desk phone that was manufacturing was stopped in 2007. And lack of modern features, unified communications, and I'll get into that. We'll get into that more in a minute, and integration with other systems. All right. So we have in our proposal a new district-wide phone system. That's a complete replacement. All of the handsets, the desk phones, the back end, the servers, right down to the headsets that some of the office staff wear. We would like to get this installed this summer, and we feel we can do that with quick action. And the last piece would be a go live and training prior to the start of the school year. And then I'll turn over to Chris to talk about some of the features and benefits.
Hello. So yeah, some of the new features and benefits we would get out of a new phone system. As Rob mentioned earlier, that unified communications. What that is how that new phone system ties into some of our existing systems throughout the district. So we've made some investments over the last few years in some new PA systems in the buildings throughout the district, and also some safety and security systems, Bluepoint being one of them, that can integrate with the phone system, allowing us to leverage communication into the classrooms in some of those emergency situations, or just broad trying to communicate with people throughout the buildings. This phone system would tie into those, which our existing phone system, due to age, isn't capable of doing. One of the other big ones would be instant messaging. We've seen this used in some of the other districts we support, allowing teachers to communicate without necessarily having to make a phone call, or if they have a question for some other staff or technology or anything like that, being able to essentially text messaging like we all do, not having to interrupt that person in the middle of their time, and giving them the time to respond when they have that availability. There's moving forward into this remote learning, as we've all kind of experienced. The phone system also would do some online meeting integration, which would allow recording, those types of new features that just aren't things that are available on the the system from 2004. The mobility is, there's actually apps that integrate with this phone system. So whether it's a Chromebook or a school provided laptop, they would be able to actually tie into this new phone system, allowing them to leverage their classroom extension, or being able to call internally even when they're not in district. So for instance, in the situation where now, you had, everybody at home, teachers at home trying to do instruction, they could leverage their in-classroom extension at home with this new system. It just make things easier, less reliant on personal equipment to do that, to perform those tasks. Presence, that's basic term for just allowing people to know what the person's currently up to. So we call it presence, but that could be if they're on the phone, if they're in a meeting. These systems tie into our calendars and would be able to let people know when those people are available or not available, which is a nice feature. I already spoke to the integration there. New handsets with modern features. So these new handsets, the new phones on the desks, those would allow for a lot more integration. So Bluetooth is one of the big ones. So if that teacher wants to integrate their personal phone into their classroom phone, they could receive or place calls using their handset instead of using their personal device as well. That also goes for if they're offsite, or if there's somebody calling into a meeting, you can, those systems can then be integrated with one another to allow a phone call from a personal handset into our district system as well. The wireless headsets is kind of something that the office staff mostly utilizes. A lot of the administrative assistants and secretaries. This system has an integrated, which makes things a lot more simple. for them as far as operating and replacing and maintaining those over the years. And then with all those things being said, our hope is that it would lead to staff being more productive and efficient. And I'll pass it over to Chris LaHaye if he wants to talk about the timeline piece there.
So yeah, thanks, Chris and Rob. This was one thing that we got together, Chris, Rob, and I, me being new to the district, and Rob and Chris have been transitioning a little bit here and there as well. So in order to get this completed this summer, as they had spoken about, we would need to get started on it relatively quickly. So considering the cost of this project, we would like to move a little bit quicker on this with board approval than probably we otherwise would like. We had a call with Moss Communications last week, and they are confident they can get everything in place, including training, by mid-August, but we would need to get the order placed here before the 1st of July. So we are asking to move a little bit quicker than probably typical. One thing I do want to also say is that even though we would be purchasing this phone system in July/August, with a successful bond vote, this is allowable as an expenditure under the bond because it is included as part of our plan and the ballot language. So we could, with a successful bond campaign, actually put this expense to the bond funds when we get there. So also something to consider. Otherwise, it would, of course, be a general fund expense.
If the bond doesn't pass, can we use the other fund that I forgot the name of?
Thinking fund?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Great. That's a great question. Unfortunately, we cannot use the sinking fund because this is technology and it is equipment. So if you go to voters now with a sinking fund proposal, you can put technology in the language and use sinking fund dollars for technology, including phone systems such as this. But because when Cedar Springs went for the sinking fund, it wasn't allowable. Technology was not in our ballot language, and therefore we cannot until we go to voters and ask for a new sinking fund that does include technology. Does that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Perfect. Rob and Chris, I don't know if you wanted to touch on this one real quick. I had put the cost of the project here, but did you guys, Rob, did you have anything about the bid process? Because this is something that we would need to bid.
1 year ago, the Ken ISD prepared and posted an RFP, request for proposal for phone system bids. And that included all the Ken ISD campuses, in addition to all the center-based programs. And when the Ken ISD did that, they also added language so that other districts in the county could take advantage of this bid. So we did receive several proposals and a year ago, and we started last summer, and then just this last, I want to say it was 2-3 months, when we had our little shutdown or disruption, we finished a large portion of that installation at the Ken ISD. So we're very familiar with it and very pleased so far. And we can definitely provide some of that bid information. We can provide that to you, Chris LaHaye, and he can share that with you.
So was this done in consortium style?
Yes, it was.
So we're using those bids. We don't. So that's how we get around us doing 3 bids.
Yes, that's
okay.
Right. We have.
I'm sorry. Has any of the other districts gone with these? And if so, what was the feedback back from this?
I will tell you, so far, we have installed this in all our center-based programs. We have not installed in any of our other, our other 3, I should say. But I will tell you that one of our districts, Sparta, has an identical phone system that's been installed for 3 years. Their process was a little bit different. Kent City is looking to make the same upgrade this summer, and the other district, Comstock Park, we're looking at the same phone system 2 or 3 years down the road. We've been very pleased with the support and the ease of use and management of the system.
One other thing that, and I was not here, but I heard of an issue that I don't know if we want to speak about, where our phones actually went down. Rob, was it because?
So I'd say I could.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'd say I can speak to that a little bit. So due to the age of our system, we're very much pigeonholed into a spot where our hardware is too old for us to put it into another system. So if for some reason our servers or a back end of our phone system went down, we would be in a situation where there isn't a current system that's available that we could replace that with, that would be compatible with the handsets that we have in the classrooms and the offices. With that being said, we've obviously made every preparation we can to avoid that from happening. But that does lead to some downtime when we have issues, unfortunately.
So Chris, is this in the upcoming budget?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. It's not in the upcoming budget. This would be an addition, in expense to that budget. And you know, from speaking with everyone that I have about this was something that was a no-brainer that needed to be done before COVID-19 hit. And now with the budget concerns of COVID-19, that's why I initially kind of hit the brakes on it, admittedly, but learning about just how dire of a situation we are in, and given the fact that even with the budget projection that I have for next year, $160,000 seems to be money well spent to make sure that we can communicate, because you know, along with COVID-19 is undoubtedly going to be coming some challenges with communication, whether we're remote or fully in person and sliding back and forth. You know, if the virus does flare up, we need to have a dependable system in which we can communicate. And I know that is something that's on our flight plan as one of our goals. So that's why we've decided to push this forward despite the budget uncertainty, and really ask the board to approve this project, because it seems to be something that is very necessary moving forward.
Chris, this might be a dumb question, but you said that if the bond passes, it can be paid through that. Does that mean we won't be charged for it till at least after the bond either passes or doesn't?
That's a great question again, Shannon. We actually don't have to sell the bonds until we need to. So the plan is, with a successful bond vote already, because of our general fund balance, is to actually have the general fund shoulder the burden of our bond work, starting as soon as we begin, which will start hopefully as far as, you know, planning and that type of thing in August and September for sure, and not actually sell the bonds until next June of 2021. And the reason we would do that is the longer we wait to sell the bonds, the less time we have to pay interest, and basically the more savings we'll see, and the better we can utilize those funds. So just like we'll shoulder some of the burden of the bond costs, at least initially, until they become too much to bear for the general fund, this would kind of this would fall right into that same thing.
So we're kind of like, just to make, I'm not real good with this stuff, so just to make sure I'm clear. So we're kind of like borrowing, assuming the bond passes, we would be borrowing from our general fund and then paying it back with that bond money if the bond passes?
Exactly. Yep. We would make sure that the bond, we're basically we'd be using the general fund for the projects, but it's completely allowable as long as they were all in the language of the bonds and in the plan that went to the voters. We couldn't go past next June because obviously that's when everything has to be accounted for appropriately for the end of the fiscal year. Yeah, we can do that and then real quick make those accounting changes to use bond proceeds for all those expenditures, and it's perfectly allowable.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Based on the dates that we're seeing, we need to take action tonight in order for this to be in place for the next school year. Is that right?
That is, yep, that is what we are being told by Moss. We do have the option of calling a special meeting, but this is something we would want to move on as soon as we possibly can. Rob, Chris, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. For our best opportunity to get that in place for everybody in the fall. Yes.
The way it's been laid out, we're kind of in a corner. We really don't have a choice, is what you're saying.
Well, we have the choice of, I mean, we can wait until the June 13th meeting and get some of it done, or we can always wait until we have more information and do the system upgrade in the summer of 2021. I think Chris and Rob would agree that this isn't a good thing to take on while school is in session. Correct.
I understand that.
Who agree?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I have a question, more of a technical question rather than financial, but if this new system allows for a lot more integration, and you even mentioned potentially with teachers being able to use their own personal phones or technology, is there concern for privacy issues, confidentiality issues with, you know, student information, for example? Are there pieces in place that would prevent some of that breach of privacy?
Those are all those are great questions, and those are all things we would have to discuss and look at prior to implementation and rolling this out and choosing which of those features we roll out to the staff.
One more technical question. If we were doing building remodels, moving around, I'm assuming these have some degree of hardwired in. I mean, probably a lot of them are wireless, but will there be rework then after the bond passes if we are shuffling the buildings around, or will this be something that will be installed that will not require that rework?
The phones themselves, the handsets, the desk phones, they connect to the same jack, the same wall jack as the computer. So really for us, it's just a matter of taking that phone, unplugging it, and moving it. So there's not a lot of work if we do building renovations. For us, we'd probably just remove all the phones and then put them back in place when the work is done.
So you guys are not rewiring? That's not a part of the bid? They're not pulling new wires for the system?
No, our existing wiring that we use for our current phone system, while it's not utilizing the full speed it's capable of, that's another feature that this new phone system would give us, is that the existing wiring is actually more capable than the phone system that we currently have. And we use the classroom PCs, not to go into too much detail here, but we connect the classroom PCs through those handsets in the classrooms. So they're actually running at a reduced speed currently. That isn't a major factor, but it is something that would be a potential upgrade by going to the new system as well.
So it sounds like any type of renovation we do, you know, that'll require us to pull new wire for whatever location. That, I don't feel like we're double dipping in that sense. Trent, does that make sense?
Yep, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking if we have to move boxes, we move in boxes either way. I just wanted to make sure if we're, you know, in a you know, doing some kind of small server farm somewhere that was in a place that wasn't going to be, I was thinking more the hardware.
Sure.
So board, we have a little technical issue. We don't have it on scheduled for action tonight. I guess I would ask Chris, was Moss steadfast in their thinking for that deadline for tonight, or does June 13th allow for that, for them to start, or was that a total drop dead date?
Guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would need to get these ordered prior to July 13th in order to almost summer.
I agree. That was what I was being communicated as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this isn't a new topic. We do know that this has been behind, so I would say that this is not a surprise. The timing is a little wonky, but understandably why. So we've known that these have been outdated. I think we can all agree on that. So
Yeah, I would wonder out loud if we're going to have teachers using their personal cell phones to tie into the system, would there be an expectation for them to receive some sort of a stipend for using their personal phone for schoolwork?
So to reiterate a little bit there, sorry. That's just a feature that's available. That is not something that we would have to necessarily do as a district. My impression of how we would probably roll it out initially would be if they have a district provided device, there's software that can be put on that would allow them to tie into the district. We could decide at a later date whether we wanted their personal devices to be part of that, but as another has brought up, you know, there's some implications there with security of data and vice versa. So
I'll say that I have a similar system at my office, and at times it's kind of nice. People just call into my extension and it rings to my cell phone, and then I can, you know, take the call at home, which that's kind of what I've been doing for the past few months. So from that standpoint, you know, security wise, they just have to go to a room if they're talking about students. But that is a good question, Jeff. You know, I don't know that we really have a policy per se that addresses kind of the uniqueness of this opportunity. So it would definitely be something that we would need to circle back on. But from what I'm hearing, it's just a feature that doesn't have to be released in that sense.
And it's
but it's
definitely,
still,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's still nice to have that ability, though. I found it very useful, especially if, you know, this thing continues on or kicks back up in, you know, September, whatever. You know, at that time or somewhere in between, we can talk more about how that gets utilized, I would think.
And that's definitely something that we could address in our technology use, administrative guidelines and policies for staff, if it was the case that we turned that feature on. Chris and team, what if there was approval in December for installation over Christmas? To give the board a little bit more flexibility.
You know, we would want to talk to Moss about that. There's always that possibility. I think we'd have a little more time to plan that out. You know, we'd have approval, they could get the equipment, and then it's a matter of quick, you know, implementation, really. You know, installing the handsets, they could do a lot of the work ahead of time, and limit the downtime. We could definitely discuss that with them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know as though we asked that question. Do you want to talk about that, Chris Dart? I don't know.
So yeah, I think you made a good point there. I think one of the sentiments too was just having some of those features possibly available to us, not knowing the future of the returning to school. That some of those features of being able to communicate or how they could communicate with that system would have a lot of value possibly coming in September. But we could definitely explore that option if that's the direction we wanted to go. Hold off a little bit.
It may not help you with your decision right now, but definitely find out some more information.
But you know, Chris Dart makes a good point. If we, for some reason, don't end up back in the classroom, we're going to have something in place to communicate with those teachers from wherever they're teaching from. Matt, you commented on you have a phone system similar to your work. I do as well. It's very beneficial to have that. You know, and Heidi, you mentioned that this is no surprise, and we all kind of are aware of it. You know, if anybody cares what I think we just move forward tonight. My opinion.
Yeah, Jeff, I was gonna do the same. If there's no other discussion, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda in order to include this. Got experts saying it's going to help our teachers as we move forward through COVID, and any way we can, as they're supporting our students in this unusual time, I think we should do it. So I'd motion to add it to the agenda tonight.
I second that.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion on that? Okay, we have a motion to add to our action items tonight, the phone system as presented. And we have a second, and we don't have any further discussion, so I'll call that roll to add it to the agenda. Vice
Hey,
President.
Heidi, sorry.
Yep.
Just real quick, it'd be action item D. Just
Okay.
to say that
Action item
for
D.
clarity.
Okay. Yep. To add action item D to add the phone system as presented. So I'll call the roll to add that. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, motion carries to add that action item for this evening. Okay, that brings us to discussion item F, food service cafe signage with Chris LaHaye.
All right, I promise this is my last thing for the evening, and I'll be as brief as possible. So this is just an item for your consideration. Coming in when I did, there was the food service spend down plan, but this was actually something that was not on the plan, but was in the works between Holly and Jeff Malik, and it was new signage for our cafeterias in many of our buildings. So I'm not sure how much prior knowledge there was of this, but in looking at where our fund balance will be, and if we are back in any full capacity next year, we're not far away from being put on a spend down plan again. So this is just something for consideration I wanted to put on here. Holly Haywood had asked me to, and I wanted you all to see it. So she had these created through consortium pricing through HPS. So we do have presentations for each school. I am not going to go through them tonight. This is the high school, Red Hawk, Cedar View, Beach, and Cedar Trails. I'm not positive, but I assume there's not a quote for the middle school because there must not be signage needed there. But you can see in each presentation where these signs will be placed. And then there's even pictures of what they'll look like on the walls, and then the different signs as you run through. So the whole point of this, these are the type of things that you see when there are excess fund balance and food service funds. These are ways that you can make your lunchrooms look nicer and provide a better service to the students. So obviously just another thing that because of COVID-19 has just kind of gone a little bit by the wayside, but feel free to go through Board Book and look at each of these. Again, I don't want to take your time. They did a great job of showing what they will look like hanging in the cafeterias. And they look really, really nice. So the total quote, I put it on one slide here, is just short of $23,000. So it's not something we necessarily need board approval for, but because it is the food service fund, I would like to have board approval before moving forward on this. So not something for tonight for action, but I'd like you to consider it. We can revisit it at the July 13th board meeting. Ken was having GRBS repaint in the cafeterias in preparation for these signs. And so really all we have to do is say go, and they will be in place before the school year begins. So a little bit less work involved in putting signs up than an entire phone system. So any questions about the signs, please let me know. Can be now. You can email me. Feel free to call me anytime.
No questions, but I think they look super cool.
Yeah, I think, you know, like I say, I agree with you. And, you know, these are something where when the state says, hey, you have too much money in your food service fund, you need to spend some of it, or else we're going to issue you an audit finding. These are the kind of things that you do. So they would be very nice. They would make the space look better. And yeah, I mean, you can see it's right up to the wall signs to little menu things all over. It would really look very nice. So.
Okay. Any other questions right now for that issue, for item F? All right. We'll be seeing that again for action for July 13th. So that brings us to the public comment portion of our meeting. And we do have 4 attendees with us. And unless Scott has received any other public comment, this would be the time now that we could hear public comment on the budget that we'll be voting on tonight, or any other issue that anyone wanted to share their feelings or with the board. They have their 3 minutes, and you can use your tools to raise your hand. So Matt, I think you're looking at the screen for us too.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anybody in the?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. So last call for any public comments. Scott, you don't have any emails or any?
Did not receive any emails, no.
Okay. And our board emails are all public. If anybody has anything after this meeting, the public can contact us that way as well. So we're going on record that we have no public comment for the budget hearing or the meeting. So we will move on to our action items. And first up, we have the approval of the 2019-2020 budget resolution as presented. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved. Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Gilmore, supported by Vanderhyde. Is there any discussion? Having none, I'll call the vote. Vice President Schaffner?
Yes.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde?
Yes.
Trustee Rivard?
Yes.
Trustee Bowser?
Yes.
President Reed? Yes. Motion carries. Our item B for action tonight is to approve the 2021 budget resolutions as presented. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. Motion carries. And we have action item C to approve the 2020 L4029 tax forms for Kent County and Newaygo County as presented. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none, I'll call the roll. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, motion carries. And we have our action item D with an amended agenda for the phone system service as presented. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved. Support.
We have a motion by Vanderhyde, supported by Gilmore. Any discussion? Having
Just clarification.
Yep.
You did mention, I think Heidi, you asked the question. I just want to reiterate that this has been bid out and is a part of the consortium. So we, Cedar Springs Public Schools, does not need to bid it out to 3 or at least 3 companies, correct? I see heads shaking, so that's good.
That's my understanding. Or the bid documents, Matt, we will have to get those bid documents from the ISD because that's something that will be audited by our auditors as well. So yes,
Okay.
that Rob, I know you could speak on that one more time, but yeah. Yep.
Yes, we will. We'll get those documents. I'll work on that tomorrow.
Okay. And I don't know that this was asked, but I'll just ask it for the sake of asking it. Was Moss the lowest bidder?
Yes, Moss was the lowest bidder.
Okay. Sounds good. That's all I had.
Thank you. Any other discussion? And I will note for the record, again, this is not a new issue. This has been very open and obvious an issue. So I'm comfortable with adding it tonight. So having no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, motion carries. The phone system is underway. All right, that concludes our normal meeting pieces, and we'll move into our work session. When we were back with real peopleness, we moved to another table, and it was a little casual, but we'll just proceed on here in our Zoom format. So our first item for our work session is K-1 literacy update with Julie Van Bergen and Tricia Schenefield. Welcome, ladies, and thank you for going through all those other items before it was your turn to speak.
And I don't know if Jen Haberling, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if Jen Haberling wants to give a little background or if we just want to turn it right over to Julie and Tricia.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Scott. So our K1 plus 2, 3, 4, 5, and even into 6 a little bit this year, group of teachers have been working diligently on aligning our practice with the science of reading. And we like to say often, when you know better, you do better. And so these ladies are here to help us to understand some of the work that's happening with early literacy that we know will have a great impact on the trajectory of our students and their ability to read for the rest of their lives. So we've had the opportunity this summer to pilot some things in a very strange remote setting, much different than what we had planned. And boy, that would be a gratitude that I would share, is that the teachers who've been working on that have really had a heavy lift and have been doing a great job of being adaptable. So Tricia and Julie are leading some work this summer around the science of reading, and I would like for them to share with you what's happening and for you to have an opportunity to ask any questions you might have.
Great. Okay, I'm going to thank you, Jen, so much for that. And thank you for inviting us tonight. Julie and I are very passionate and excited about this topic. So we are thrilled to be able to share this with you. And I'm going to share my screen here. Can you all see it? Because
no,
you can't. Let's see. Maybe it won't let me. Okay, let's see. Try again. How about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Well, I'm Tricia Shenefield, and I'm H, and I have been the principal there since the 2017-18 school year. And Julie and I have been working really closely, as well as with Cedar Trails and Cedar View, on a lot of new learning, as Jen said, and we're just excited to share that with you. So I'm going to let Julie take over from here for a minute.
So I have not had the pleasure of meeting most of you, but I'm Julie Van Bergen, and I taught for 20 years, and I was a principal for 13 and a half years. My passion has always been literacy. So when I had the opportunity to apply for a job in Cedar Springs, I certainly did, and am thrilled to have worked with both Trails and Beach for a year and a half now, and we've done a lot of work. My job is going to be bringing you back to school just a little bit so that I can familiarize you with some of the terminology that you will hear. So first of all, when we say what is the science of reading? Well, the science of reading actually includes all methods and approaches that have been found through research to give students an advantage when learning how to read. And you'll hear teachers talk about the simple view of reading. It's almost a shame we're talking about this now because it actually came about in 1986. But the simple view of reading has actually been condensed down to a mathematical formula that reading comprehension, which is what we want all kids to be able to do, is comprehend, is equal to being able to decode or figure out what the word is on the page and their language comprehension that they bring. So anything that they can understand that has been spoken to them, if they can decode the word, they should be able to comprehend. And there's a rope that shows what that looks like down below, and I'll explain that a little bit more on the next slide. So this visual also was created 19 years ago when Dr. Hollis Scarborough was doing some research, and she thought that this graphic would help people understand how reading takes place. And there's two strands. That bottom strand is being able to figure out what the words are on the page, and that top strand are all of the elements that teachers pay attention to make sure that students have good language comprehension. And when both of those strands are specifically taught with students, we know that students have a much better chance of being fluent, good readers. And here's what we know about learning how to read, and we know this from cognitive scientists. So reading is not natural, like walking and talking. We must provide direct instruction. In fact, they say that reading has only been around for about 5,000 years, whereas oral language has been around between 50,000 and 150,000 years. And so we know that our brains were not wired to read. So we are still in the process of figuring that out. Many researchers are looking at brain scans, and we know that all fluent readers learn to read in the same way. They print off the page on the right side of their brain, and they use the left side of their brain to process that through sound. And we know that all readers learn the same way. One interesting thing that they found through looking at these brain scans is that our brains use a speech to print circuitry, not a print to speech. So when students are looking at a page and we think that they're just looking at all these squiggles and taking it off, what really happens is they look at those squiggles, and that might go in on the right side of their brain, but it's the left side of their brain, that speech part, that is really working when they are being fluent readers. We know that some students access the circuitry much more efficiently than others. In fact, they estimate about 40% of students will learn how to read just by having been read to and being exposed to text. However, there is 60% of the students that need direct instruction. And we know that all students, even students that can figure out how to do this on their own, all students benefit from being taught systematically and sequentially. And lastly, prevention is easier and cheaper than intervention. And currently we've been doing a lot of intervening, so it's also much better for students' self-esteem.
Okay, thanks, Julie. I'm going to walk you through a little timeline of how we got to where we are today and kind of go back from what Julie was just talking about. So as I said at the beginning, I was blessed to become the principal of Beach Elementary at the 2017 and 18 school year. And at the end of that school year, we had been engaging in reading interventions with struggling readers for 2 years. So 1 year prior to my arrival and then my first year there. And something that really struck me at the end of the year is that I both personally and professionally, I was really committed to finding alternatives for students, because at that time, all struggling students K through 3 were receiving the same reading intervention. So there was no differentiating based on what the student might show as a need. And we know that there are various gaps everywhere. So I was struggling with that, just knowing that we really needed to match the intervention with what the need was of the student, and to continue to give the student the same intervention for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and seeing little progress. I just felt like we were really doing a disservice to the students. So I just really started researching. I like to read reviews, and I just was really looking a lot into different books I could read over the summer, different ideas. And I came across this book by David Kilpatrick, which is The Essentials of Assessing, Preventing, and Overcoming Reading Difficulties. What really drew me to Dr. Kilpatrick is that he is just a regular, normal guy. He is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York, College of Cortland. He's not a researcher. He's just a reader, an avid reader who has read tons and tons of research and has compiled it here in this book. And he is not going around talking to sell anything. He's not promoting anything. In fact, when you ask him, what do you suggest? He will not say any program or anything. He is just very passionate about helping kids learn how to read. So that's something that really drew me to him. So that was in June of 2018. And then as I was reading this book over the summer, we get our update from the Kent ISD, and I saw that the ISD was bringing him in September, and I was super excited. So myself and then Steve Johnson, our school psych at Beach at the time, and one of my PLC leaders attended that professional development or that seminar that he put on the one day in September. And that also was when our district committed to MTSS, was September of 2018. Then in April, so more towards the end of the school year, the ISD took Dr. Kilpatrick's presentation that he had given in September, and they kind of created their own so that they had an offering to continue that work. They called it Foundations in Reading. And so we had several elementary staff attend, and some additional staff really started to engage in using some of the science of reading strategies that they had been learning about and hearing from Dr. Kilpatrick. And then in April of 2019 to the present, We were, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish that. We also in April hired Julie on as our K-3 literacy coach, and staff representing all 3 elementary buildings attended a Dr. Kilpatrick presentation. He came back again, the ISD brought him back in April. And that's also when Julie became coaching or started to coach our reading and writing lessons and providing coaching and modeling, our reading and writing lessons in both Beach and at Cedar Trails. And she continues to do that work as well now. So then our journey continued at the beginning of this school year. So in September of 2019, we began a book study with this book you see here. It's called the Equipped for Reading Success. It is a companion book by Dr. Kilpatrick that goes with the book I just showed you on the previous page. We had our PLC leaders at 2nd and 3rd grade collaborated with Julie as she led the book study for our building, which lasted several months. Teachers would read ahead. Julie would come to PLC. They would collaborate and work through. Julie would model some of the things they had just learned about. Then teachers would practice. Julie would give feedback. So it was a great cycle that we had going before March 12th. So in one exciting thing there too is just knowing how important that work was. We had like our reading interventionists, for example, attended that book study and stayed for PLC when they were not compensated for that at any time. They just did it because they knew it was important and they wanted to participate. And then also in September, we had kindergarten and 1st grade teachers. All kindergarten and 1st grade teachers went to the foundations training, and several more of the 2nd through 5th. So the majority of the elementary staff were trained in that foundations of reading at the ISD. And I didn't mention, but after I saw Kilpatrick the first time, I did buy 4 of these Equipped for Reading Success spiral-bound books and started slowly sharing some information with some of the teachers that were interested, and they began to use some of the strategies. And one success story, I think that was way at the beginning when we were just learning about it was I had a resource room teacher that's been with the district for a really long time, and like 30 years, and she was considering moving to the RITS program, and then she started doing these learning about the science of reading and implementing Kilpatrick's work. And she came to me and said, I don't know if I want to leave now because this is so exciting and I can see what an impact I'm making and I want to keep doing this. So I thought that was really powerful. She did end up moving to RITS, but it was still powerful for her to recognize that. And like I said, that was way at the beginning of our journey. So then in January of, excuse me, this year, the K-5 admin, many of our teachers, our reading interventionists, Jen and Julie, we all attended a 2-day presentation from Dr. Kilpatrick. He came back, one day was the first book that I showed you, and then the second day he focused on this Equipped for Reading Success book. And Cedar Trails and Beach also committed at that time to using the science of reading strategies in our 30-minute intervention block, rather than providing that one standard intervention for all students. This allowed us to really differentiate our 30-minute reading block so that students were getting exactly what they needed to fill those gaps. And then just most recently in May, we had what we called our data day, and we did spend that learning more in depth about the science of reading. So the 3 elementary principals from all 3 buildings in collaboration with Julie, we created a 2-hour PD presentation for all the staff. And then all included in that, 2 of the Cedar Trails teachers shared their journey with the science of reading. It was very positive data and to support what they had done. And then also summer school was offered to 160 kindergarten through 5th grade struggling readers using the science of reading strategies and skills. And we are obviously collecting data on that still because it's still in progress, but we've had really positive feedback as well. And one thing more I'll say about the all staff training in May is that prior to our 2-hour Zoom meeting, we asked the staff to watch an 1.5 hour podcast around the science of reading, which we didn't know how that would be received, asking them to do that on top of the 2 hours. But it was a very well received, and in our feedback from the staff, when we asked what was the most powerful or meaningful part of the PD for that day, they said everything. They loved doing the videos before the podcast before meeting and then having that time to have conversation. And it also showed that real consistency and unity between kindergarten through the 5th grade, where all of us gave the same professional development in the same way, around the same time, which is something that we're really trying to build, is that consistency across the buildings. I know that was a lot. I'm gonna stop for a second to see if anybody has any questions so far, or just keep plowing through. Heidi?
Yep, so thank you for mentioning self-esteem for the students. I appreciate that. Can you tell us 3 things that the students saw different in their reading time out of this training?
Sure, I can speak to that.
Okay, Julie, yes, please do.
So the shift from going from print to speech is huge. So one of the things that is very different is you start with students by saying, tell me the syllables in this word, or tell me the sounds in this word. And you do it before they see the word, because of all this neuroscience and the looking at the brain, we know that students map in their brains by the sounds they hear. So that's a huge shift, is starting with what students can do with their sounds. The second thing is that it is individualized. In other words, we did an assessment on students to find out exactly where they were at. Developmentally, students typically hear syllables before they hear individual sounds. So we found out exactly where they were on a developmental level, and we focused in on that. And I would say the third most important thing is thinking about, when I talked about the 2 strands of that rope, and being able to know that students need that language comprehension. So we would give them vocabulary prior to their reading that they might come across. And again, we went first to the speech and then to seeing it and making sure that they had that vocabulary.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to add up to that a little bit, sorry, that, you know, we know that kids can memorize words, or, you know, visually see it and memorize words at the younger grades, and then they may look like a fluent reader or a grade level reader. And then once they start to get to those words that are a little trickier, or maybe multi-syllabic words, they have no skills to sound those new words out, because all they've been doing is memorizing words. So that's kind of what we're trying to move away from that. We're giving them strategies to tackle words instead of just saying, you need to memorize them.
Was there a follow-up, Heidi?
There was. My other wonder would be the mean nothing words, the, of, and those that stump a lot of the, well, dyslexic readers. We know where my heart is. So how does this science handle those?
So I'm so glad you asked, because Dr. Kilpatrick, that definitely was the bulk of his work was with students with dyslexia and reading difficulties. And again, if we would teach those tricky words by sound before we show them by sight, they are finding that 95% of all students, including students with dyslexia, it will require much more repetition. However, we have to start with sound before sight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That makes me tear up. Wonderful.
Oh, to be honest, it makes me tear up as well.
If you go to the, actually, if you go to the, I apologize, I don't know the exact name, but like the Dyslexia Association or something website, they talk all about Kilpatrick on there as well. They very much support his work.
So
I can't see everyone's. So, okay, I was just going to say, does anyone else have a question? I can't see everyone.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So do these fit in like with the little bookmarks that are sent home with the kids, the reading strategies, like look at the picture, flip the vowel, secret stories, any of that? So it's different than that.
Put those in the trash.
Okay. Okay. Right.
That is not, what they have found is the strategies that poor readers use are perhaps on that card. Proficient readers know how to, they've already got the sound system and they know how to work through words, but that is a great question. And I have to say, we had a meeting today in Cedar Springs. The teachers in that meeting are like a sponge, and the presenter was from a different district, and she just said she wished that all groups of people were like Cedar Springs teachers, that they're on a journey, they know where they are, they want to learn, and so we know where we are and we know where we need to go.
So from a results standpoint, do you see a gap between a good reader and a not good reader, and then that starts to close down, or do they continue to move forward at the same gap?
So when we know exactly where their breakdown is, and we teach into exactly where that breakdown is, the gap does close. And I've been in districts both as a reading consultant and a principal where I've seen that gap close. The challenge is that we have to, the kids that are struggling have to make much more progress than the kids who aren't. And when I shared that prevention is cheaper and better than intervention, we have to get this right, especially at K1. And so that's where we've really been trying to get this right. But yes, the gap can close if we implement the right activities, strategies, and look at data.
Thank you.
So I just want to confirm that I'm hearing we are looking and identifying the strugglers before second grade when it would be IEP time.
Absolutely.
We are. And the other thing the meeting today really focused on, we need to look at what we're doing whole class, and Trish is going to talk about this, tier 1, because we have not known about this. And when you know better, you do better. But we need to do this at whole class, or what we refer to as tier 1 in multi-tier systems of support, or MTSS.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your questions. So that is the next thing that I'm going to get into here is showing for you the connection with our MTSS essential components and how directly they correlate with what we're learning about best practices for reading. So one is team-based leadership. And what we're noticing, like Julie said today, we met with 12 teachers that volunteered to come in today for 3 hours on their summer break because they're passionate about the work. So we're seeing teacher leaders emerge even, outside of just PLC leaders. We're collaboratively making decisions regarding research-based strategies for tier 1, 2, and 3. And then number 2 is the tier delivery system. I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide. But as Julie was saying, tier 1 is what we do for all students. And this is the ideal. The ideal is tier 2 would be 15% of students, and tier 3 would be that 3 to 5% of students. And usually then those are the students with IEPs that get that even more intensive support. Whoops. Number 3 is selection and implementation of instruction, interventions, and supports. So that is exactly what we're doing. The teachers and district leadership are collaborating to design a scope and sequence for instruction, interventions, and supports. And that is the work that Julie and I started today with that group of teachers. Number 4 is the comprehensive screening and assessment system. So there are several progress monitoring tools that we have studied over the past school year, looked at what other districts are using, and summer school is piloting one of the tools that we are considering. Something that we are greatly missing is a way to monitor no matter what we do for tier 2 interventions, we need a way to monitor to know what kind of impact that's having on students. And currently we don't have anything. So we're waiting until we take our next iReady assessment to know if the student makes progress, and that's not acceptable. We need something we can monitor their progress like every couple of weeks so that we can make adjustments and get them the instruction that they need. And then 5 is the continuous data-driven decision making. So we have, as I mentioned, we had 2 brave teachers at Cedar Trails that started this journey a year and a half ago. They have collected data and they shared their success stories with their colleagues in May, which was very powerful. Their data is very encouraging, and we can share that with you if you're interested in that at another time, or just email it to you. And we know the work is continuous. As I said, we started really with the big work today, but after today, even more so, we know that this is a big lift, and we're up for the challenge, but we know it's a big lift. So here's the visual. So hopefully this is helpful. So this is the MTSS triangle, and this is the green is the tier 1, and that's where we want to have 80% of the students. Tier 2 is the yellow, where we want 15% of the students, and then tier 3, well, we don't want, but we can have, and then tier 3 is 3 to 5%, which is the most intensive intervention. Right now, our triangle is almost upside down. So what I mean by that is we have more kids needing this level or tier 2 intervention than we have down here in the green. So that's when Julie was speaking to where we know we need to focus on tier 1. We need to focus on what are we doing for all kids? Because what we've learned in our research too is that these activities and strategies are good for all kids. All kids are engaged. That's other feedback that I've heard from teachers is that even the highest students, the highest readers in the class love to do these phonological awareness and phonics activities because they're fun. It's just oral learning. And we know that students can fluctuate between the green and yellow mainly depending on the topic, and we see that in math a lot. They may be yellow when you're doing geometry, but they may be green when they're doing measurement, for example. So they can fluctuate. They don't always necessarily need to be in that intervention. It just depends on where they are. And these are the kids we like to focus on. But as Julie also said, this tier 2 intervention is way more expensive and time consuming than getting all the kids in tier 1 to where they need to be. And for Beach, we have 2 reading interventionists and we have 530 kids. So if our triangle is upside down and we have the majority of kids in yellow, there's no way we can intervene even in a given school year with 2 people.
I have a question.
Yes.
So to get the intervention, it used to be in the old days. So you used to have another teacher look at it and have a meeting, and it was called CAPS and it was everything like that. So are there anything that stands in our way to get kids help, or do we have to go through an interview process to get kids the help they need?
No, we're strictly looking at, we never like to just look at one that's not a good practice. You know, we look at least 3 pieces of data to see where the holes might be or the gaps might be for the student. But if we see that they need help, they're in an intervention. We let parents know that they're in an intervention, but they can move. The groups are fluid. So, you know, we may have an interventionist start with 5 students. We'd never have more than 5 students in a group. And they may see, like, you know, this one student is not a good fit. They don't have the same deficits as the other students in the group. So we immediately move them to a group that's more appropriate. So it's really, there's no interview, I think you said?
Oh, yes.
Nothing
the whole
like
process. And we may have even had to have Mr. Smith sign off, you know, so, okay.
Oh, dear.
Good. Okay. No, it was before him, so the position. Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Anything else? Okay.
So the current state of teaching and learning, and I'll start over on the at the very top. So the staff is eager to determine how this new learning will impact the school year. They email questions. They're willing to come in. When we went to remote learning right away, we came up with Science of Reading remote lessons for students that needed them, and the teachers were receptive. Parapros sat in on training meetings. It was just really impressive. The feedback has led to the summer work. So when we did that K-5 training, I think all the principals and myself were really anxious about what the feedback was going to show. Our teachers willing to learn more about how the brain really learns to read. And the data that came back, the feedback was so encouraging, and they want to know how to use data. They want to use the research, and the information we got from that meeting is propelling us into, okay, what are the very next steps? Because we know we need to map out the journey, and then we need to take a step at a time. We can't get there all in one day. Again, the positive feedback from all K-5 teachers, even including the specialist teachers. So they came to the online training, and one, I think it was a music teacher, talked about how he would change how he introduced vocabulary so that he focused on sounds before the kids would see the speech. And to me, when you've got an entire group of professionals moving in the same direction, the results have the possibility of being huge. And then lastly, the teachers are requesting for supports in how they can integrate this new learning in what they currently have. So the current state is encouraging, and again, our meeting today was just we did a lot of work, and at the same time, it felt so good to have someone from a different district realize the passion of the Cedar Springs teachers. So what questions might you have on, we gave you like a college course in a short amount of time.
So I have a question. The triangle's kind of upside down right now. Do you guys see the gap? I'm just wondering, is it in language or is it word recognition? Where do we see the largest gap? I mean, if the rope's basically 2 chords, you know, which one do we need to shore up first?
Well, unfortunately, I think we need to work with both strands. We know that we have not taught students in tier 1 or whole class. We have not really focused on making sure it was developmentally where students were and being able to individualize that. We now can do that because we have an assessment. That language part of the rope, we have to be preemptive when we're teaching a lesson and think what words, what vocabulary might be tricky, and we have to do it in concert. And I would go as far as to say we have to really go into social studies and science when we're talking about the teaching of reading.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or wonders that you might have?
I just want to thank you for presenting tonight, and I'm genuinely moved by what you're doing and the work you're doing and the support you have. I just want to make sure you have enough support from Jen. She's giving you everything you need. Is there anything that you need from her? Go knock on her door, tell her what you need. I just sincerely thank you so much for tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate every board member for being the job you do. My husband was a board member for 15 years, and there's times that can be very thankless. So sincerely, I thank you for the job you do.
So Jeff, to that point, in terms of the support that is coming forward, we have some next steps that we have planned over the next several years, including continued professional development for our teachers and the opportunity to work with Julie on individual practice, but also what will be our collective practice. How will we revise our curriculum maps and our pacing guides to reflect this new learning that we have? And that's really the work that this team is doing over the summer, is starting to engage in thinking about how will we add phonics and phonological awareness to what we already are doing. We want to also continue to collect data as we go into the next school year. And that means that we have to think about a progress monitoring tool. So that's something that we will be looking for a recommendation from this team. And then really planning those right on time, just right interventions for students based on what their specific skill deficiency is in terms of reading. And we want to just make sure that we're doing that all the way through K-5.
Thank you for your support with them, Jen. We appreciate it.
I can't wait to see the results that this team has. Trisha has some really fantastic data that she could share from Beach, and we've seen that there's a team at Cedar Trails that's been doing this, and their data is fantastic. So we say every time we're together, oh, imagine where we're going to be in 2 years. This is so exciting. So we are very excited to take a step forward, even though it's a heavy lift.
You know, in the last slide that Julie and Tricia shared, it's about current state and desired state. And in order to move from your current state, it takes a tremendous degree of leadership, but it also takes a great group of people who are willing to, you know, join in and be a part of that movement. And so, you know, it obviously the work that Tricia and Julia presented tonight, it's co-led with Beth Whaley and April Stevens at Cedar Trails. Tricia is doing a tremendous job at Beach leading this work. Carol Franz is leading the team and the efforts at Cedar View. And again, this is all coming around the efforts of Jen and the team in the Academic Services Department with the PLC leaders and the teachers. So it's definitely a group effort and just so much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for allowing us to come tonight.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Maybe in person in the coming months, maybe.
I hope so.
All right, we can move on then to item B in our work session, the high school and middle school handbooks. Scott's got an update for us.
Yeah, thank you. And Julie, Tricia, you're welcome to stay, or you can move on to other life-giving events as well. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. So if you scroll down in the document shared to page 15, there's a highlighted section around the student dress code. So one of the questions from our last discussion around this topic was, what's the why? Why are we making any recommended changes over the language from last year's dress code? And really the solution, the answer to the why is just to provide greater clarity for students, for families, and for staff around what some of the parameters are. And so what this current body of language attempts to do is speak to that why, to tie it back to board policy, and just to give some clarifying language and that clarifying visual around what is appropriate for a school setting and what types of clothing choices might be distracting to a school setting or cause for a student to have to be asked to change a particular garment or to potentially not be allowed in class based on their unwillingness to comply with this set of protocols. So wondering if this language is heading us in the right direction from your perspective as a board.
I can't speak for anyone else, but it's not for me. I don't feel like it clarifies. I feel like it constricts more than the previous language. I'm very concerned about saying, it feels like it says, if your belly button's showing, you're not going to class. And I feel like it's saying whether or not someone's belly button is showing is more important than them getting an education. And I don't agree with that. And I'm not going to agree with that. And I understand that I'm only one of 7 and I can live with that, but I don't think this is clarity. I think this is changing what it was and making it more constricting, and I think it's unnecessary. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from it.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Scott, I think it might be helpful, and I mean, there have been some thoughts shared on this before, but just to reiterate, if you could, language from last year was actually recently changed from previous years as well, and I'm just wondering what in practice, trying to figure out how to ask this appropriately, just over the past year, what has been the difficulty with where it was at last year, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think what I'm interpreting, or how I'm hearing Jeremy and Ron speak to things at the high school, is just they're trying to provide greater clarity for students, staff, and families around what is appropriate or what the expectation is for appropriate dress at school.
Mm-hmm.
So, the visual that's provided has greater clarity. I guess, if you, as a former principal, if I had the 2 paragraphs that were listed from last year, I had a tremendous amount of latitude around how I would interpret those 2 paragraphs. At least by having the visual there, that gives me some boundaries or guidelines in which to, apply that standard or apply that dress code to the students. And it also gives students and families some visual indication as to what is appropriate for the classroom and what's not appropriate for the classroom.
So to follow up with Tracy's question, it's an over to give greater clarity. but we didn't have any data of certain points that were certain issues. Were you looking for more specificity? Whatever that word is, Tracy.
Yeah, I remember when we changed the language to be a little bit more vague and open-ended, knowing that there could be some confusion, but we felt like there were other wins and benefits to having it that way.
Mhm.
So if I'm hearing correctly, in practice, it didn't end up being as beneficial or clear enough. Would that be correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak for Ron and for Jeremy. I only know from my own personal journey as a principal, trying to provide guidance for students and families as they're making choices around school. What's appropriate clothing for school. But that's definitely something that I can circle back with them on and try to gain some greater clarity on this for you. And it's only the end of June, so we have a lot of time.
I will say I do appreciate that, but it's to us early, so thank you for that. Shannon, I appreciate your opinion on it, but I respectfully disagree on it. I do feel like this does provide a lot of, as you were saying, clarity. Just reading it from more parent perspective, I think it's helpful to have the graphic, to have a little more laid out. If my kids decide to purchase a shirt on Amazon, do I have to worry about language? Do I have to worry about, this or that? And yes, I do. So it lays it out fairly nicely. So I do appreciate it.
Anyone else from the board want to weigh in?
Perfect. Well, I appreciate the direction. Tracy, I'll get some greater clarity around maybe interpretations from, or why the adjustments from 1819 then into 1920, and then the proposed adjustments for 2021. And I'll have more feedback for you for the July meeting. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item C in the work session, which is Superintendent's Evaluation. And we know as the board, one of our main jobs is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. And we have chosen the MASB form in which to do that. And that has been uploaded with Scott's self-evaluation pieces in it with corresponding folders. The other piece, which is many, many artifacts. Mr. Rivard used a big number, but if you want to go at that in-depth reading, you can go to that Google folder and review that information as well. So tonight, Scott's going to present his self-evaluation piece of it. We can discuss a little bit, and then we would put it on for action in the coming July. So if there was anything that came to us after this meeting, it provides a nice process for giving Scott feedback of concerns and also accolades as well. So I'll let you, Scott, go through the self-evaluation piece of it.
Perfect, thank you. So first, it's just so important to recognize that this instrument is not only a reflection of my work, but it's a reflection of Jen's work. It's a reflection of Chris's work, and before that, it was a reflection of Jeff's work. This is a reflection of Stacy's work, and Matt's work, and Ken's work, and the principal's work. It's not just one person whose work is being reflected in this body, this document. And so it's a tremendous team that we have put together. I think the biggest difference, if you look at the body of work from this year compared to last year is just the infusion of the strategic plan. And that's been something that has moved forward with time. To be honest, the first 4 months of last year, July, August, September, October, we didn't move a lot with the strategic plan because we were focused in on a bond project. And so, you know, starting then, after we got our feet back under us from the bond election in November and started looking at the analytics from the EPIC MRA survey, it gave us an opportunity to really get moving again, focusing on those growth areas of the strategic plan. And that's been just a tremendous effort. You know, I thank Stacy and Jen. They've been very assertive in the continued utilization of that strategic plan, and in a really positive way, you know, asking, you know, how can we incorporate this into various strands of our work? And so, you know, if you look back at that body of evidence, you look at our huddle notes, and that's a 100+ page document. You know, you'll see how we made a clear transition from the meetings in July, August, September, October, into November, into December, where all of a sudden you're starting to see coding and strands of the strategic plan embedded into that daily work of our huddle group. And you'll see a similar transition as you look at our principal meetings, those MGM meetings. You know, we code every item now in our huddle. We code every item now in our MGM meetings because we want to be mindful of where we are in our efforts to fulfill the growth opportunities that we have as a strategic plan. And so I think that's been the most exciting difference between the 2018-19 school year reflections transitioning into the 2019-2020 school year reflections. Some things moving forward then into 2020, 2021, you know, we're utilizing our strategic planning process, those flight plans, in not only to reflect and evaluate on our programs, but also as guidance for each member of our administrative team who's using that flight plan document and those flight plan tools as we chart individual growth and individual advancement as well. And so it's really, it's been exciting as a leader to be a part of this work, not only as a huddle group, the directors and that small group team, but also seeing it come to fruition with our principals, and now as that work continues to move forward with our administrators and our teachers for this upcoming year. That's when we're really going to start to see some traction around this exciting work. You know, and so I think as you work through the document, what I tried to do is identify the language in the rubric that best matched our practice. And so it's not about being, you know, effective or minimally effective or ineffective or highly effective. It's about where that language is and where our practice lies. And so if we look at the board governance and or the governance and board relations section, there's evidence that supports under policy development the aggressive or the active approach that we take to bring about the changes and revisions within the Neola policy. This is not about being perfect. This really is about identifying areas in which we can grow. And so what I did was I took each of the sections of the rubric, coded with a color so you can see a visual representation of where the body of our work lies. And then down below in the comments by the superintendent, I shared the why that I coded the way I did. And then you can also see how we're embedding those growth opportunities from the strategic plan into this dialogue as well. And so rather than go piece by piece, really this is a large body of work. There are hundreds of artifacts that you can link back to. if there are specific questions around maybe a why for a certain level of effectiveness that I quote or that I charted, I think that would be viable, or that would be a helpful thing. But I'd, unless you want me to, I'd rather not go section by section and talk through the different elements.
Just one question I had regarding the staff relations portion of it. It indicates that teacher feedback is a required component of that portion. Do we also get feedback from your team directly, Stacy, and from Jen, and from Matt and Chris? Is that included in that wrapped up information?
Yes, so there, twice a year, we solicit feedback from members of the admin team, from staff, from other superintendents in the region to give us feedback. While the teacher feedback piece is not large yet, the teacher feedback piece is present in this tool. Again, it's about growth. And so one of the things as we transition from the 1920 school year to the 2021 school year is I've developed a SurveyMonkey tool that will allow staff to take a look at where we are based on our strategic plan growth opportunities, and give us a sense of where they see our work progressing. So whether we've accomplished the mission, whether we're progressing nicely, whether we're progressing slowly, where we've not yet started. And so that's going to be something that becomes a part of our work from a district perspective, but also from a building perspective, from a PLC perspective, and a team perspective. And so there's significant amount of growth coming in that area. And so it'll be exciting to see where that data takes us moving forward. It's definitely going to highlight the things that we're not yet focused on in the strategic plan. So our team did that, our huddle team did that back in January, and then the principals came together 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and did a similar practice where we just took a look at our flight plan, reviewed and reflected on the growth opportunities, and then just gave the team feedback in terms of where we were and where we were progressing. So other questions or wonders?
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I appreciated, there were a few where you scored yourself a 3, and in just reading through, it definitely seemed like they were very solid, still effective in what you were doing, but I just appreciated you wanting to make that next step. You used the language a couple times of wanting to develop that strategic plan. I think like the community relationships was one of them, and I just appreciated that honesty, but yet at the same time, I wanted to just comment, you know, those things do take time. And so I just think you still made great progress and you're still doing a wonderful job, but just recognizing that you could step that up and be even more strategic was good. I appreciated that.
Thank you. Yeah, so one such example is A3, providing you with information. So my goal is to put a Red Hawk Weekly in your hands every weekend. I missed like 4 weekends. That made me crazy. So, so I am not, what's defined consistent? Is it 48 out of 52? Nope, it's 52 out of 52. And since I'm not there, I'm not there. And it's an opportunity for me to get better.
I just want to say I appreciate the focus and the correlation to the flight plan. It just keeps everything neat and clean and avoids rabbit trails. So I appreciate, and I appreciate the documentation that we can see right where it goes.
And we're just getting started on that, which is so exciting. So other thoughts or wonders, or if there are other artifacts that you need me to present and to place into that folder, I can gladly do that as well.
I appreciate the level of detail, Scott, that you've got into this. I'll look through it. I have breezed through it. I certainly appreciate the honesty at which you fill this out. And it's for me, I think you and your team are doing a fantastic job. And so it doesn't shock me to see that the self at 94, and honestly, that's probably on the conservative side. I just think, honestly, the team that you, as far as the leadership team for Cedar Springs, is definitely the team that we want, moving us forward into the future. And I got together just a group of rock stars, and I couldn't be happier to be working alongside of you. Say that just because you missed 4 weeks out of 52, that still averages 4 per month, so I wouldn't beat yourself up.
So other wonders or questions? One of the other factors in the overall determination of effectiveness. So in the tool provided by MASB, there's a factor of effectiveness that's related to the language in the rubric. Then there's a percentage that is based on student growth. And then there's a percentage of effectiveness that's related to the acquisition of goals. This year, we didn't have a student growth component as we were closed out by COVID-19. And so for us, the overall determination of effectiveness will be based on the rubric language and also the progress towards district-wide goals. For you, it's page 19 of the handout. There's an opportunity within that Excel spreadsheet to alter the percentages of what the percentage of the overall effectiveness rating is based on professional practice and what the percentage is based on the goal piece. To be honest, and we can fluctuate those numbers. We can have professional practice be 90%. We can have the progress towards district-wide goals, be 10%. We could go 70% in the professional practice, 30% in the progress towards goals. Depending upon how we approach those numbers and how we want to use those factors in the overall determination, will then ultimately factor down to determine the overall effectiveness rating for the year. And so that would be one thing that we'll need to talk about as we move into our July meeting. As we conclude the evaluation process, just need to do some thinking around, how do we want to weight this thing? What weight do we want to give to the evaluation tool itself, the rubric, and then what weight do we want to give the progress made towards our goals? So right now, just for a factor, I've got 80% in the rubric, 20% in the goals. But we can adjust those as the board sees fit in the July meeting.
I'm just going to comment, to me, it makes sense how it's presented with the 80% with professional practice, because if you don't have that, you're not going to make it to the goals. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. That's just my initial thinking. And we can revisit it in July. I just want to throw that out there.
Heidi, that was my thinking too. Just they're very intertwined. So I can see that reasoning.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. You good, Scott? Anything else?
I'm good. No, thank you.
All right. We'll carry on the conversation in July, possibly in person. So that brings us to our item 13, which is planning, and that would be our next meeting in July. And stay tuned if we're in person or not. And is there the planning, we didn't have that on there. Is there any other planning pieces? Anybody is graduation? Somebody had asked me about that.
Can I give 4 quick updates?
Yes, please.
So graduation, it does not look like that we're going to have any shift in Lansing yet this week to get us to a level 5. And so rather than be restricted to having only 100 people per ceremony at the stadium, I spoke with Principal Barenwald this afternoon, and we are going to shift to the July 14, 15, and a rain date of the 16 dates. And so hopefully we'll get to level 5 by then. And so that's one piece in regard to graduation. 2, there's a KISD press conference tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock if you're interested. They're going to be presenting the results of the survey, and I'll share that link out via email after we conclude this meeting. Our community forums kick off tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And so if you're interested in queuing in to one of the Bond community forums, please join me in a Zoom room in just over 11 hours. And we'll be talking about bond items. And then I wanted to give Jen just a minute to share. We had a great meeting today with representatives from Canvas, and it could be a real game changer for us as we move forward with learning in the future.
So as Scott said, we had a talk with an organization called Canvas today. They are a vendor of a learning management system, which we are considering using K-12 in order to streamline communication between teachers and parents, between teachers and students, and between parents and students in terms of whatever the configuration might look like in fall 2020. So whether we're back in person or whether we're in a hybrid situation or fully remote, this would be one-stop shopping in a much more streamlined fashion and allow teachers to have the opportunity to collaborate much more readily, and students would be able to see what their assignments are more easily than they can in simply Google Classroom. So we're working with a committee of teachers and administrators to make some choices about that in the next several days.
That will be interesting.
It will be. Hopefully you are reading your Red Hawk weekly updates from Stacy and I. We're doing some pretty intense work right now around making some decisions about what fall could and might look like. And as you know from all the headlines, it's work that doesn't seem to have a real simple answer.
No, it does not. And thank you for that work. It's definitely uncharted work.
For sure.
Okay. Any other planning? We're clear. All right. So that's the end of our meeting. So it is 8:52. Thank you for Zooming in with us, and we will stand adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Be
Bye.
well.